Jeff, another fall is upon us.
It's true.
And with it, another Forza game.
Yes.
Forza Horizon 4.
Yeah, it's a Horizon year.
Yes, it is.
The even years.
Yes, I was about to say it's an off year, but that doesn't sound fair.
No, if anything, I've come to believe that these are the on years for Forza for me.
It's a bold stance, but
I think everyone's going to have their own take on it. You
Sure.
know, Forza Horizon is the open world version of Forza, right? It's like, hey, we've built in some off-road exploration, a lot of different race types, traffic, the stuff you expect from an open world racing game, where obviously like motorsport is way more like closed tracks, real racing.
Horizon is the one where they encourage you to drive through stuff.
Yeah. They give you
instead of
like a form of points
Yes.
for driving through things.
Yeah. So you played a significant amount of Forza Horizon 4.
I have. Yeah. And I'm here to deliver
the verdict.
My take, the hottest of takes.
Get the gavel in here.
We'll get a something in here to smack
some
around.
props.
Mm-hmm.
We're still feeling this thing out.
Yeah.
But yeah.
If we need props, that is yeah. So this is the fourth Forza Horizon.
Yeah.
And
also the 37th Forza game overall.
Something like the 7, 8, 9, 10, 11th,
yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
To 12th if you count Apex.
So I guess the big question is, what's new about it? Is it still fun? Is it still fresh?
It is. And so I think the thing with Forza Horizon 4, think about Forza Motorsport for a sec. It took around Forza 3 and Forza 4 for Turn 10 to have kind of really honed that formula in a way that I think was widely appealing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you could say some of the same things about Forza Horizon 4. Like, this feels fresher than they've done in the past. They've made some significant changes around the edges of things that I think will freshen it up for people that have played the previous games. And it's a good time for people to kind of get into it if they never have. The new stuff is that this is like a connected world. You can basically see other players via Xbox Live in your world driving around doing stuff, and kind of lightly interact with them and opt to get into deeper, more real things with them if you so choose. Previously, they've had AI driving around the world, drivatars. They've called them all along. It's AI theoretically based on the driving abilities of the person that you're seeing in world, but that in this game the AI doesn't seem like it is like really lining up with how people may really have driven in the previous games or anything like that.
Right. Maybe they'll get deep learning AI in the next game.
Yeah, give it one more Xbox out there that can do the deepest of learning, and maybe you can just have it be really good at chess while it drives or something.
Or maybe you don't need that because now they have actual people.
Exactly. Yeah. That's kind of the real thing here is that you'll load into a world, and this is something that largely happens after the first handful of hours. You kind of get through some tutorial phases and kind of see what the game has to offer, and then it connects you up to a live world that will have a weekly rotation because the other big change is seasons. Mm-hmm. Not like seasons in a sports sense, but seasons in like a winter, spring, summer, fall sense. And so every Thursday the game will change seasons. And with that will come different time-limited races and barn finds, which are cars you can find out in the world, and other events that like encourage you, like, oh, this is a co-op championship. You need to, hey, why don't you go out and interact with some of these players in this world that you're in and see if they want to team up and do this co-op thing. So, ways to kind of bring people together in a time-limited fashion around a specific set of races.
Does it make it easy to recruit people that you don't know and aren't necessarily voice chatting with? Like, are the kind of built-in communication shortcuts good enough to say, hey, do this event with me?
It's got a bunch of, like, quick chat things, like, okay, and no, like that sort of stuff. You unlock a bunch of goofy ones, too. But also, when you drive up near someone, you can hit the X button, and there's an actions menu. You kind of can do some stuff from there as well. So the idea is, in much like in previous games, you kind of form a convoy, more or less. And then once you're in a convoy with players, you can embark on different events together and that sort of stuff. But yeah, for these co-op races and stuff, you can't really even play those alone. It wants you to go to the mission start point with a posse already. Mm-hmm. So, you kind of get out there and recruit and do your thing. It's got built-in support for all the Xbox clubs stuff too. Which I found a little confusing because it's got two separate settings. You can build a Forza team and a Forza club, and the team can only be 25 people, but the club can be 2,000.
Whoa.
And I've played a significant amount of this game, and I'm still not really clear on what the big major difference is there. Because they both use the external kind of system level club system. The club will get flagged as, hey, this is a Forza team, and that sort of thing. But in practice, they don't seem that different.
So overall, it sounds like they make multiplayer kind of a more forward-facing component of the game.
Yeah,
this time, and is that handled pretty well?
I
think
it is. Yeah, and obviously, like Forza has had multiplayer for years. It's had different kind of like fun. Hey, play some Infected and some other kind of team games and stuff like that. But yeah, this makes it a little bit easier to kind of get together with players and do that sort of stuff. Of course, if you just want to get into like hoppers for different types of multiplayer modes and stuff, they do still have that as well. So you can kind of go into the team adventure and go off and embark on, hey, do these 5 events and that sort of thing. All that is still present. So that's the summary version of Forza Horizon is like, that's kind of the big new stuff.
Yeah. Online and seasons.
Yeah, and then the rest of it really is pretty similar. That's not to say they didn't tweak little things here and there in a lot of different facets of the game, the way you progress, all that sort of stuff. But by and large, it is the same style of open world driving game that it has always been, with this seasons and this connected world put into it, which actually, like I said, that makes a really big deal. Yeah. I think if it didn't have that, you'd be looking at this going like, well, I guess they made another Forza Horizon. Yeah. It's good, but hey, whatever. This, I think, keeps it fresh and makes it more relevant. It just feels like a living game. Yeah. When you come back and it says, hey, here are the time limited events, and hey, once every hour this thing's gonna pop off and all that. I think that helps you. It helps break up the action. It's very easy to get into a rut with these games of just like, race, and by the end of it, you're like, this is not, these tracks don't feel that different from one another. I'm kind of burning out. Yeah. But having that thrown in the mix really does help it a lot.
In general, those 2 new things are enough to prop this up.
Yes.
Okay. If you felt yourself kind of flagging on the series,
if you feel like you're maybe petering out, and that's like I felt 2 was maybe not different enough, and then 3 was also not different enough, but I think 3 was just a better open world than 2 in some ways, and that sort of stuff. But this is like a good, solid open world with all the stuff you kind of know.
In the UK now?
Yeah, in the UK, Edinburgh and surrounding areas, like so kind of like farmlands, which is they've trafficked in a lot of that over the years of just like, hey, here's a field you can hoon through and break a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. Except now this field has sheep in it.
Exactly. Yeah, and the sheep will avoid the cars. It's like. The sheep look pretty good. Honestly, the sheep look pretty good. But yeah, I mean, that basically means like you'll see a lot of the same type of events. Like, hey, here's a cross-country open world event. Here's a street race. Here's that sort of stuff. But they have kind of layered in some new stuff. They've got a handful of different like story, like it's a handful of different stories really. And those are each broken up into a bunch of different chapters. So you kind of immediately get into the story of be the stunt driver for the movie. And that's a series of events where you are doing stunts for a film. And then over time, hey, you'll be introduced to Drift Club and that sort of stuff. But there's one late game one where you team up with a streamer who is counting down her top 10 favorite driving games of all time by having you playing Forza Horizon, driving cars that are in setups that are similar to things that evoke those games. Huh. Which is kind of cool because they reference other games pretty directly in most cases, where, hey, here's one where she comes up and says, hey, I really like Crazy Taxi. And then you're in a car that looks, like it would fit in a Crazy Taxi game. And you're jumping over you're jumping off a big cliff. It's not a super difficult event.
Is there any offspring in the game?
No, but they do trigger some songs that like you can tell they sat down and went like, do we have a song that like we could put kind of in here that at least like fits the basic tone of that? and so it works.
So I mean, that sounds like the most story one of these games has had to date.
More or less, yeah. It's always been about, hey, there's a festival. You should be the best racer at the festival. Go.
My sense of the stories in the past has essentially been driving is fun.
Yeah,
like that's the story.
Yeah, and so layering these things in there, and all of that kind of factors into you get out of the car in this game, not in a gameplay sense, but you customize a character.
You see a character.
Yeah,
frequently.
Motorsport had this last year. This is kind of like built on that, I guess, or just conceptually at least. Because you're unlocking, boots and glasses and hats and dances and stuff, and so you're seeing that character out of the car a lot in cutscenes, or a lot more than you've seen in the previous games. And so they're putting that player into more situations that kind of also helps it a little bit, I think. It's like a very subtle thing. Normally you'd be like, oh well, the character doesn't matter. It's a driving game. Who cares? But like they use it just enough. The emotes are just goofy enough with the dancing and stuff to help to where that helps give the game a little more life. I think.
I guess that is another kind of minor new addition then.
Yeah,
to what they've
sure.
done before.
Yes, yes. And then it's still the same Forza.
Yeah,
it's got that attention to detail. It's the driving is what it is. You've got a lot of layers of assistance you can turn on and off, and they'll give you like a credit bonus for turning up the difficulty, or turning off traction control, or turning off the ability to rewind. So you can kind of set it how you like.
Still more simulation than arcade.
Definitely.
I mean, obviously, the fourth iteration, they're not looking to
totally
mess with the core
this
formula.
isn't Need for Speed. It's not Burnout. Like you're not like just whipping around corners like crazy. Like you need to use the brakes. That's the split, right?
There's a line.
Do you
driving
need to
line.
hit? Yeah. Do you need to hit the brakes in this game? Yes or no?
Yeah.
And yes. There's a driving line that'll tell you kind of the best way to take turns, which you can then turn off for a credit bonus if you don't need that either. I found the driving line to be good just because it's an open world game and you want to know where to go.
Yeah.
Even if you are off-roading it and just getting from point A to point B as quickly as possible when you're not in a race, just having it the nav kind of point you in the right direction was pretty crucial in that sense.
Yeah. How do they handle like kind of car acquisition, car upgrading, car progression? I mean, the series has had multiple types of progression over time.
Yeah,
and some kind of ups and downs there. Is it
you haven't
come together pretty well?
It does. You have an overall level, so you're gaining influence, which is it's basically experience points. And every time you level up, you get a spin of a wheel that has cars on it, but also has clothing and just credits, which are the currency you would use to buy whatever car you want. And they've basically said like, hey, if you have the credits, you can buy the car. In previous games, at least at launch, I think they corrected some of that in Motorsport. They would have a situation where like, oh, you can't even get this car because you're not high enough level or whatever the heck. But this is just like, hey, here are the cars. If you're buying the expensive version of the game that comes with the season pass, they're gonna give you like a ton of cars right out of the bat or out of the gate too. There's like a James Bond pack of cars too, some Aston Martins and that sort of stuff. Cars are not a problem, man. I in my time I have like 90 cars or something. I don't even know. I haven't even driven most of those cars. I probably never will. And then each car has its own skill tree. They've had a skill tree in the past where you're kind of like, hey, I'm earning these skill points, I'm spending them to move up this this area of skills where it's like, oh, now I'm getting 10% more points for my drifting, or I'm better at braking stuff, or I'm getting more points for braking stuff. It's not an actual gameplay enhancement. They've built that out per car, and some of those skill trees are kind of built around what they envision the car is for, and the more the cars with a higher rarity, like legendary or epic cars and Forza edition cars and stuff like that, will have a higher cap or like more skills to buy, basically. And some of those are just like, hey, buy this skill and you'll get a free spin of the wheel to unlock something or whatever. So like, not all of them are super relevant to that car and how you drive it. But one of them, it seems like every car has it, is you can get in one accident and still keep your skill chain going. And it's 25 skill points to get it, which is kind of a lot, but it's, it's worth it.
Very useful.
Yeah, if you're just like flying around corners and you smash into a tree, that'll break all your skill points unless you buy that perk, and then you've got it. But that's on a per car basis.
Right. So my big question, so my initial reaction to hearing like, hey, every car has its own skill tree, that sounds cool.
Yeah.
But I guess my big question is ultimately, are you excited every time you get a new car to start leveling it up, or does it become tedious that you have to start from zero every time you get a new car?
So your skill points carry over. They're just it's a shared bank, so you can spend them wherever you want.
Okay. So you're not starting from zero.
Exactly.
Every time you get a new car.
So like I drove this Subaru for most of my time with the game, which So I guess to your actual question, like the way that stuff works is not perfect. The way the car selection stuff works is not as fluid as maybe I wish it was in some cases. Not because of the skill tree, though. With the skill tree stuff, you just jump into another car. You probably have some points to buy the first few things and whatever. And you're earning skill points so quickly, and most of the skills you're buying on that skill tree just get you more skill points.
Okay.
So it really is a system that kind of feeds into itself by and large. But some of it will be like, oh, you're getting a 10% influence bonus for finishing races in this car and stuff like that. So it does touch the other progressions, but by and large, it really is just skill points for more skill points. The thing I ran into, though, is that, once I had leveled up a car and unlocked all that stuff, that Subaru was a really good all-around vehicle. Like, there's off-road racing in this game, there's on-road racing, there's drifting, and the Subaru, the way I had it set up was not a great drift car. You could tune it, the same way you have been able to for years, to maybe get it a little closer to where you want to go. But it was good enough to get like 2 stars on these 3, these out of 3 on these drift events and stuff like that. So I spent most of my time in that Subaru, unlocking car after car after car after car.
And not driving.
Yeah, and just going like, whatever. And so that can be a bit of a downer, especially because like you can change cars at any time when you're in the open world. There are some things, though, you have to go back to a house. You purchase player housing, and those kind of serve as the early fast travel points. So you can go back there, but you have to go back there to tune your car, basically. You can change cars wherever, but you always have to go back to buy upgrades, or even buy a new car or something like that, which I wish that stuff was just a little bit smoother. I wish you could just kind of pull up the menu and go, I want to change this car from a B class to an A class.
And have it just drop out of the sky.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Because you can have them deliver a car to you at any point, but you can't tune it unless you go back.
Right.
And then on top of that, like, I found it to be a little inconsistent sometimes, because you'll pull up to a race event, you hit a button to trigger the event, and then from there a menu pops up, because most of the events you can drive solo, you can do it in like a PvP setting, a co-op setting, or Rivals, which is their kind of ghost racing kind of time attack type stuff. And those menus, sometimes it'll pop up and say, hey, do you want to change cars? And sometimes it'll just throw you into the event in the car you're in. And I wonder if that says like, oh, you're in the only car you have that fits in this event, so you're going to be stuck in it. But it would be nice there to be able to say, hey, actually, I want to upgrade this car from one class to another before I take this on, or hey, I'd like to buy another car before I do this. Like having to kind of figure out, what is this race looking for? What do I need to go buy to have that option when I get here? Or if I just switch into this car and switch to a different car, then start this event, if that car is not valid for the event, is that what causes it to then pop up and say, hey, do you want to change cars? That stuff felt a little inconsistent. And there were definitely times where I was like, man, I happened upon this event and I'm here and I'm going to do it, but boy, I wish I was in a different car, because it would be more fun, or I would be more likely to try out different cars if it was a lot more consistent about like, oh, I want to drive this car, but this car is a D class right now because I just got it and I haven't touched it. So let me switch to this car. Let me spend the money to upgrade it to B class or A class or whatever, and then take it in there.
So just a little more guidance.
Exactly. Or just
on what they recommend.
Yeah. Like what they recommend would be okay, but really just like, let me do everything I can do to cars before that race starts.
Right.
To kind of get there. I feel like that would be, just from a flow perspective, I think that would really,
because at that point you're not going to back out of the race menus and drive to your house to tune up and then go back again.
Yeah, and fast travel costs credits until you go and find all of the fast travel like billboards around the world and smash them all. So then at that point you're like, am I going to spend 14,000 credits to go there and back and all this sort of stuff? which so all that kind of just adds up into just like this is not as smooth as I wish it was.
Yeah.
And because the AI will always kind of base itself around whatever car you're in for the event. So if you come in a D class, it's going to be, cars that are appropriate for that car that you're driving. And if you come back in S1 class or something like that, they will be much faster cars also.
Sure.
So they always manage to keep it fair.
So how do you feel about the open world, the world design, variety that's out there?
It's good.
All that sort of thing.
Yeah, their UK, their Edinburgh location. So you get a nice variety. Like I said, a lot of farmland, but also like there's definitely some areas that are like, oh, this is built for like a good multiplayer hangout area. Like there's a bunch of weird berms and jumps and just things to do right around here. And they've peppered the world with a lot of those. They've had that in the past. Like, oh, the airport's a really fun place to drive in the Australia one. And so they've got city driving, they've got, cottages, they've got, just a lot of good windy roads. The weather really layers onto this really nicely in terms of, hey, if it's muddy, traction is going to be very different on all these dirt roads. If it's raining, then the asphalt's going to feel very different. If it's snowing, then the lake's going to be frozen over, so you can get around. Most of the races, that I should point out that like most of the races are checkpointed in such a way that you can't miss a checkpoint. So there aren't really a lot of cases where you're going to drive over that river to save a ton of time mid race. At least none that I've encountered. And so it's a really good world. You've got areas with plenty of trees, and that's what some of the most annoying barn finds are in these foresty areas where you're just like, I just need to find this barn so I can get this free car. And there's just trees everywhere. It's a pain, but it's good.
Yeah.
So I feel good about the variety in the world for sure.
So it sounds like the seasons are more of a subtle change to handling rather than like broad changes to routes and that sort of thing. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
It's more of a visual and kind of just a control thing.
Yeah, but at the same time, because it's every season will come with events that are specific to that season.
Okay.
So my guess would be like, oh, because we know it's winter, we've now plotted a
Okay.
race that you can only do in the winter.
So that's how races are relevant to seasons rather
Yeah.
than the exact same races being changed by seasonal changes.
Yeah, it's a bit of
more-
both,
Okay.
because if you're just playing through those standard campaign races, they're always going to be there.
Right.
That's gonna, those are gonna be the same routes,
Right.
and your mileage may vary depending on what season it is.
Yeah. But it sounds like the seasons are not just a fresh coat of paint every week.
No,
there are relevant changes.
No,
there.
it's nice. There will be like a bridge or like a dam where you're kind of driving over the top of it, and that will kind of wash out a bit. So when you're driving through it when it's raining, there will be a bunch of water you're driving through there, a bunch of standing water. And water will pile up on turns, and you'll have standing water to deal with there.
Does that always feel like a plus, or do you ever feel like you're just kind of being stymied by obstacles that wouldn't have been there on a different week?
Like the variety is what makes it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because if you were trying to get the highest leaderboard time, and I'm not this player, so I can't really even speak to it all that well, but if you were the type of player that was always trying to get the top of the leaderboard every single time, I imagine you would always drive in summer.
Sure.
Just to make sure everything was nice and dry for you and all that sort of stuff. But I'm not that player, and they may very well keep seasonal leaderboards. So you're the best winter racer on this. I don't that stuff. I just did not dig too deep into the leaderboard stuff. It's just not my thing.
That's a level of minutia that only the most
Sure.
hardcore people are going to go looking for. But
Sure. So yeah, I think overall the world is pretty good. I think in terms of events and stuff like that, it is pretty similar. Like I said, barn finds and hey, here's a drift zone, here's a speed camera. Like the open world things that you're doing are pretty much the same. Like here's a danger spot, jump off this jump and get 600 meters or whatever it is.
the movie stunt driver events kind of the one big addition to the roster there?
Well, so all of it, that's really just a framing for those danger spots in a lot of cases.
Okay.
And even some of those are not necessarily hit a jump. Some of those are just drive fast and a jet's going to fly overhead while you do so,
Sure.
because someone's yelling at you about stunts or whatever. So those events aren't even necessarily all built to frame up the danger spots, but when they do, it's nice because it helps contextualize it. But that's just open world stuff that you can just kind of go do. The thing they did do that I thought was nice is they don't just fill the map full of this stuff. Each type of event has its own progression. And so you're going from like level 1 to level 10 in street races.
Okay.
Or dirt races, or cross-country races, or drifting, drift zones, or speed cameras. So when you hit all the speed cameras, you're going to get a thing inviting you to open up the map, and then there'll be a bit of dialogue, and 3 more will appear. So they do kind of bring you through it, and it helps it feel like a progression. It's like, oh, you're moving on to level 7 of the dirt racing series. Only the best drivers are going to be here. And at the end of the day, the races don't really feel that different. Sure. It's not like you're like, oh, these are way harder. Like, no, it's still based on how you're setting the difficulty as a player.
If anything, it almost sounds like a way to help you not be overwhelmed by the number of events.
Yeah, if they just filled up the map full of stuff, it would be a lot.
Yeah,
it'd be too much at that point. So that's a good way to gate it. And it lets them kind of, they let you level up in a ton of different things, like taking photos or tuning cars and sharing your tunings with other players. Like the stuff they've done in the past, like, hey, if your race blueprints are driven a lot, then maybe you're going to level up in blueprints. If you're painting cars really well, you'll level up there and earn stuff along the way. If you are streaming the game on the internet on Microsoft's own streaming platform, there's even a progression for that, which is pretty wild.
Okay.
I mean, hey, this was something I thought I was going to completely hate.
Yeah.
So it has integration with Mixer, the former Beam.pro, where if you are streaming the game on Mixer, through this is built into the Xbox. I actually couldn't get it to where I tried doing it on the PC version, and some of those UWP apps, it's just hard for OBS to catch them and display them. So Forza would just crash every time I tried to stream it on the PC. So I streamed it on the Xbox instead. So while you are streaming the game on Mixer, you will earn 15,000 influence per hour.
Okay,
I think is the number.
Which is
it's actually
my understanding.
It's like 3 races worth of. It's not that.
Not a ton, but it's a little bit.
The other thing though is watching someone else stream the game on Mixer will also earn you influence. The numbers I think are subject to change. This is what I read when I was kind of researching it, was that streaming was 15 and watching a stream was 6,000.
Okay. And do they massage those numbers based on how many people are watching or anything like that?
They said that they would.
Okay.
That was what from my research, I've been led to believe that. I didn't actually do the math on how much I would earned for the hour that I streamed it. But yeah, those are supposedly the numbers. And then there's a Mixer progression that you level up along the way of that, on top of all the other things, and you'll unlock. You literally, when you hit Mixer level 9, you unlock a quick chat phrase that says, "Please like and subscribe." And
okay,
you're just like, wow.
I mean, I'm sitting here wondering how to feel about all this, but it sounds like it's self-aware enough that maybe, and especially in a game that traffics in literal influence as a currency.
Exactly. They've managed to, because there are a few things at work there. One, influence doesn't actually matter, just like in the real world.
Sure.
Social media influence is not actually that big of a deal.
And in the game, it also is not an important progression metric.
No,
okay.
it is not. But at the same time, and I think different players will feel differently about that stuff. I liked unlocking that stuff because it was very dumb. And I just like spamming the dumbest quick chat phrase I can get. And please like and subscribe is a really dumb thing.
Sure. It seems like maybe the game itself just overall is a little more irreverent than it's been in the past, or
definitely
there's a little more kind of personality.
Yes, personality
throughout.
And this kind of peeks through with, like, we were talking about the customizable characters, but also just the overall visual design too. I think they're having fun with it in a way they haven't before. This was always supposed to be the Forza that was like warm and inviting compared to the increasingly kind of cold showroom feel that Forza Motorsport. It's funny, like that used to be the thing you would say about Forza Motorsport compared to Gran Turismo, is that Gran Turismo felt very cold. But I think like Forza Horizon has moved the needle in such a way that now Motorsport feels very cold to me. The way Gran Turismo used to. So now Gran Turismo is just a freaking icebox. It's crazy. But I think they're leaning into it in a way that is fun. And the way you receive that, it also feels very earnest in a lot of ways. Like it's irreverent in ways that are just like, oh, it's dumb that I can spam this phrase, but also like I didn't expect to like the video game reference story path very much at all because of it having this framing of just like, oh, you're driving around with a streamer who's streaming and they're doing streamer stuff. And when games tap into that, they usually do it really poorly.
Sure.
Or they make the streamer just a dirtbag in a way where you're just like, oh, these people are garbage. But it's just a really earnest, fun thing where it's just like, I really like Crazy Taxi. And you're like, you know what, game? I also really like Crazy Taxi. This is great.
Sure.
And yeah, I think that it's bright, it's colorful, it's fun. The visual design around the transitions and races and stuff are really awesome in that way too, where, you'd be like, oh, it's transitioning from the race setup to everyone on the starting grid, and then you start the race, and when you finish the race, as you're crossing the finish line, it goes and warps away back to this big billboard, this huge white room. And the visual design there is really just, and all the characters are just doing their dumb dances and, and just flossing their asses off. And it's just,
sounds like they lean into it.
Yeah.
In a way that lets them get away with a lot.
That stuff just looks great. Like the designs, especially like that race finish stuff, it's a tight, seamless transition, just pop. It cuts to your car driving over a finish line in this big white showroom with this big billboard in the background that starts ringing up how much, XP you earned and all this other stuff and how much progression you got. And it just looks fantastic.
Just pops.
Yeah.
It sounds like.
Yeah. That stuff is really impressive. It goes a long way to just helping the game stand out, from its predecessors. I was going to say from other open world driving games, but that's kind of one of the other silent benefits this game has is that this genre has fallen apart.
Sure.
The open world driving game is there's not a lot of solid competition out there for Forza Horizon anymore.
Yeah, Need for Speed appears to be on hiatus, and
the Crew 2 didn't get it done this year at all.
Yeah.
And so those are games that if they were still, the Crew still is not the word to use there. But if the Crew 2 was a great game and Need for Speed was still active and putting out better games than they have been for the last few, Forza Horizon would probably not look as fun as it could because those games are trafficking in even wilder stuff than this does. But in a world where those games are pretty much irrelevant, or in the case of Need for Speed, basically non-existent.
Sure.
Forza is kind of the only game in town. And that's not to say that it's hey, we're got to grade it on a curve. It's no, it earns it. It really they've done some really nice work to it,
bringing it in a way that the past games have not.
Yeah, definitely.
So these games are pretty well known graphical showpieces.
Yeah.
What's the situation? I mean, I know it's cross-buy, or I don't know what their term is. Play anywhere.
Play anywhere.
I'm sorry,
that's their term.
Cross-buy is somebody else's term.
Same thing.
But so
if you buy it on Xbox, you can play it on PC.
Yes.
If you subscribe to Xbox Game Pass, you get to play it on PC also. All that stuff works. The saves just transfer back and forth very easily. It's nice.
So how's it look? I mean, obviously on PC you're going to be able to ramp it all the way up.
Yep.
But now I guess this is the first Horizon where the Xbox One X has been in the mix. So we got a lot of different platforms to handle here. How do they bring that across the board?
Yeah, well, I guess they went back and they I think they did work to Forza Horizon.
Sure,
3
you're right.
Even.
I think it got a 4K patch.
Yeah, but yeah, this one benefits. This one benefits by them having made a couple of Forza games on PC now. So the PC version I think has come out smoother than it ever has before.
Okay. Oh, that's right, because Forza Horizon 3
yeah.
had some significant PC issues.
Exactly. They ironed it out. They definitely got there with it, but at launch it was not what you wanted it to be. But over the course of that run, they dialed it in, and this is a really great looking PC game. This is the game that makes me feel really smart about buying that G-Sync monitor.
Okay.
So I'm playing it on a G-Sync monitor with a 1080, a straight 1080, not a TI. And you can turn on you can really get in there and tweak every setting if you want. By default, it's like, hey, we're going to dynamically optimize the game as it goes,
really,
like resolution, like all that other stuff to try to maintain.
I've been waiting years for PC games to have that.
Yeah.
I don't want to specify bells and whistles and get whatever frame rate I get. I want to specify frame rate and let them worry about that stuff. That's awesome.
Yeah. So that defaulted to ultra on that machine, and ours here as well. And so I was getting usually somewhere between 70 and 110 frames a second. And it just looks great. Running at 1440p, it just, it's a very sharp game. There's a lot of good destruction when you're crashing through these rock walls, and the rocks are just flying all over the place. Water kicking up, the rain effects as you're driving, the stuff you see when you're in the cockpit view as well as behind the back. Like the weather effects are very well realized. And you can go in and tweak that stuff when you're creating races in the blueprint mode. You can say, I want this to take place at night during a blizzard. And see how it goes.
Oh, wow.
And it's like those effects are nice, but the game handles it just fine.
Yeah.
And it's a really great looking game. Car games have long been kind of one of the benchmark genres for consoles, at least. And this is a really great looking PC game. On the Xbox One X, you get one toggle. You get the option to go between like a 4K 30, and I think if you're not on a 4K monitor, it'll super sample. But basically like high res 30 frames per second, lower res 60 frames per second. It's hard going between. If I didn't have the PC version at all, I would probably still go with the frame rate view, but I probably wouldn't feel as bad about the resolution view as I do. But there's a lot of motion blur in that resolution mode.
Okay.
That you see it, it's stuttery, it's blurry. Like I didn't feel as connected to the car in that mode as I need to play that game. It's playable. It's not broken.
Yeah.
But
if that's all you've got in front of you,
but
you can probably get used to it.
But also, like the first thing I did is switch it over. Or I drove like that for a while because obviously I'm reviewing the game. But the first thing I wanted to do was immediately ditch that mode for the frame rate mode, which, looking at it on a 4K TV, you notice it. You notice it most around the text. Like there's some thin fonts in that game that start to vanish a little bit because they're just, the lower resolution. But I'll take that frame rate every damn day. It runs at a good solid 60 in that mode on an Xbox One X, and it still looks fine. You'll notice the resolution dip, I think, if you're on a 4K TV.
Yeah.
But just to get that frame rate, and then again, like the gameplay is it's better at that frame rate. You are more connected to the car. It feels better to drive at that frame rate,
especially in a game that is kind of simulation focused. I mean,
Right.
It's not the most hardcore driving game out
No,
there, but it
but
does
it's-
demand some amount of precision.
Totally, yeah. You're going to spin out of control in this game. It's even, unless you turn every assist all the way up, when it's basically driving and braking for you in some cases at that point. And that's fine. Like, I'm not saying that's bad. Like,
Yeah.
it's cool that you can do that.
Yeah.
You want to be in control of these cars. It feels great to be on the edge of control. This is a game that, it's the game why they have rumble triggers in the Xbox One controller.
Sure.
Is this type of, it's the Forza games. Like I feel like the Forza games have been the only ones that have really taken advantage of that stuff in a really great way. And so all of that combining to, like, you feel connected to the road in these games, and the frame rate is a part of that. I don't want to say it looks like terrible. Like the resolution's good. Like it's sharp, like if nothing else, like, yeah, that's that resolution. It looks really good. But in motion, I just found it less pleasing to play that way than the other two options I had at my disposal.
Sure.
But it's a great looking world. Good variety. Like I said, when we were talking about the world, just, the city looks nice. The sheep look good. The crowd even looks good.
Okay.
They're getting good Forza
All right.
crowds.
They've arrived finally.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know if you have any other major points you want to hit, but overall, you sound pretty positive for the fourth game in this series. And again,
Yeah.
they've been making a lot of Forza games for a long
They
time.
have. I mean, it's an annual franchise.
Yeah.
They're doing kind of this. I was going to say A team, B team, but I don't know that I would say one game is an off year. It just kind of depends on what you're looking for. This is the best I've felt about Forza in a while. That said, it's a very similar game. It still has the same showcase events, which are kind of like the bane. Like it's the thing about Forza Horizon. They should get away from it. It's
the first year I remember going like,
it's a huge spectacle.
you're racing an airplane.
Yeah, so these showcase events, if people don't know, it's you're racing against an airplane or a train. In this game, there's a hovercraft, and you're like, oh man, look at this hovercraft just smashing through stuff. It's like it's a spectacle, but the race part of it feels completely fake because they build spots into the tracks where they want a good slow motion moment of like, oh, here's the spot where you jumped over the hovercraft. So the hovercraft isn't really running the race.
Right.
The hovercraft is rubber banding to be in the right place at the right time when you jump over it. It's always going to be there for that jump. And
so does that mean that the actual race really happens in the last like 5 seconds of the event?
Yes.
You just have to make sure you're there at the end.
Yes.
Okay.
More or less. If you really bone it up, you're not going to get it done. But generally speaking, if you're racing competently, you're going to win barely at the last second. And go, ooh, I barely made it. And I think they're just lame from a gameplay perspective, but they are still big spectacles. So the thing I'll say here is that there are only 5 of them. They're front loaded. You do them. You can do them all pretty quickly and get them out of the way. So it's not like in previous games. It felt like that was the thing you were building up to. You were like, oh, we earned all the XP we need to earn, and now at the tip of this pyramid is this showcase event, and then the next stuff will open. And that always felt like a very lame thing to come together into, and then spread back out from. Here, they're just kind of thrown in with everything else. And there is one that's actually pretty good. It's a Halo themed one.
Okay.
Where you're driving a Warthog and Cortana's like
you drive the Warthog.
Yeah,
you're not racing against a Warthog.
No, you're driving on a beach, and they've set up like Covenant obstacle. Like it's a fun little like Halo thing that they threw in there.
I mean, that sounds part and parcel with some of the other lighthearted stuff in the game.
Right. And so like it's a good fun little moment that also is not you racing against a thing quite so much. So it really ends up being even slightly easier than the other ones. I thought that was fun. It was a good little reference buried in there, but like the other 4 are pretty much just like, all right, and one of them's like race 3 motorcycles, which like that's not a spectacle. Even if they are flipping in front of you and spitting out smoke and stuff, you're just like, all right, guys, whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I that's the thing I look at and go like, it's one of, I feel like it's one of the worst parts about Forza Horizon as a franchise. At the same time, I think they've done a really good job of making them mean less here than they have before.
Okay.
And whatever, they're out of the way. They're barely, they're innocuous. You get them out of the way and move on.
Yeah.
You probably don't even have to do them if you don't want to. But you get a significant reward of money and stuff for doing it. So
it's still time for them to maybe come up with a more meaningful type of spectacle,
or just find ways to make those like more engaging from just a gameplay perspective, because they really feel like going through the motions. And the rest of the game is like I said, this is still the same Forza Horizon underneath. The stuff they've put on top of it, the seasons, the connected world, Forzathon Live, kind of an hourly thing to get all the players together. Like that's all really cool stuff, and I think that's stuff that helps keep Forza Horizon moving forward and still feeling good. Without that, I think I would have a much different vibe or much different feeling about the entire game if it was just kind of more of the same. Well, if it was just more of the same, because it really is very similar to those previous games.
Right.
So you kind of know what you're getting into, but that stuff layered on really freshens it up. It's a nice thing to keep the franchise going. I still think there's probably room for them to make more dramatic shifts and stuff like that too. And it'd be nice to have like a few more open worldy kind of things to do, because it is just kind of like, oh well, I found a sign and I smashed it. Oh, I hit this speed trap. I did this. Like you know what to look for. Yeah. It would be nice to see that stuff change a little more dramatically in the future.
So I guess in that context, the hardest sell for this game is going to be to somebody who has played all of the Horizon games when they came out.
Right.
And now they're looking at this one thinking, I've done that 3 times. Is this really enough? Do you think for that type of person it's enough?
I think so. I think it depends on what you want out of Forza Horizon at the end of the day. For me, it definitely was. Like, I was going into this going like as they're talking about it, they're like, oh, we're doing weather. And I'm like, whatever. And then when they said, oh, and we're doing Connected World, I'm like, okay, all right. Well, that's something this franchise has needed since the start. And so that's a big deal. And so that for me was enough to kind of bring me back in, even if I'm not like the most multiplayer focused Forza player, but just having that connected live game feel around it where you're like, oh, that player's level 100. What's his car look like? Oh, he's driving this tiny little car with a Mighty Mouse thing on it. That's actually the car I'm driving. This crappy little thing with Mighty Mouse on it, because I had to drive over to the Forzathon in that thing so people could see me spinning donuts in this little piece of crap. trying to drift in it. Like that stuff's fun.
Yeah.
Like that just, you know, you can kind of have some goofy fun with other players in that way that, you know, you couldn't really do before.
Yeah, like that is the most exciting pitch that I can hear for this game. Is just a place to have fun with other people.
So I think for me, that definitely helps it kind of maintain its status, you know? Like that stuff is enough of a big change to where I'm like, all right, I'm here for another one. Like I would still like to see a more dramatic change to kind of just the events themselves. Like I said, more open world stuff, that sort of thing. But that stuff is still totally solid, and the multiplayer stuff they've done, I think, puts it over the top for me in a way that I still feel like pretty comfortable recommending it.
Okay, and then how do you feel about it as an entry point for people who have maybe eyeballed the series?
No, this is a great place to get in. Yeah. You know, because you won't be done with all those events, or you know, you won't look at it and go like, oh, I know exactly what this is. You know, the barn finds will be a fresh concept to you, and the showcase events and all this other stuff.
And you think just the core driving is friendly enough?
It is.
People can hop in.
That's the thing they've really, you know, between motorsport and this, like over the years, if you think about like simulation style racing games on consoles and how unforgiving and unfriendly they used to be, and this is something Gran Turismo has gotten better at as well, but you know, when they started really getting motorsport just right around 3, around 4 is when they really just added so many different difficulty, or they really did a good job of presenting those difficulty settings of like, I want to turn on traction control, I want to have assisted braking because I'm just not sure about the apex of these turns or whatever. Like, you know, I want to follow this driving line. They made a game that anyone, even if they don't play driving games, you can still set this in a way that you can have a good time with it. And, you know, ideally, and this is how I usually play these games, ideally, as you get deeper and deeper into it, you are more comfortable behind the wheel and you start turning some of that stuff off and getting better at this type of game. So, you know, these were games that 10 years ago, I barely felt like I could play. And they've honed that stuff. They've added enough toggles and settings and stuff like that I really feel like anyone who, you know, is interested in a driving game can get that out of this. They're not going to feel like, oh, I can't, I'm just hitting walls left and right. Like, this isn't even a good time. Okay. Like, I think you can get it done. All right.
I guess this is the moment of truth.
Yeah.
Where you say a number. Is that how this works?
Yeah.
We're just going to say a number.
So, yeah.
And hold up some fingers.
It's a 4-star game.
Okay.
Yeah. It's 4 out of 5.
Yeah.
Like I said, you know, there are a lot of aspects of it that are very familiar, you know, if you've been playing these games for really any length of time, you know, and I do think, to me, that speaks to like there's still a need to change here, but I think that the online stuff, the connected world stuff, the season stuff, the Forzathon stuff is all stuff that, like I said, without this stuff, we would probably not be talking about a 4-star game here. Yeah. This is the sort of stuff that kind of, you know, takes it a step forward, gives them kind of a new foundation. We're like, okay, like now you've got this connected world, you've got this kind of live game stuff going on, and now I'm really interested to see what they do in a couple of years. You know, assuming Forza Horizon 5 happens, then like now that once they've had some time to really marinate on these concepts and how well they've gone down, you know, with the community and that sort of stuff, like once they start expanding on it, and hopefully at that point they can start replacing some of the framework that has been with the series for these 4 games to really push it forward even further.
Right.
Yeah.
Sounds like a fairly exciting time for the franchise.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I can't say that I was necessarily expecting to like it quite as much as I did. Yeah. You know,
a pleasant surprise.
I was hopeful, I guess. That's the word. Is, you know, like hearing about the connected world, it was definitely a feeling of like, this is what the series has needed all along. I can't believe they're finally doing it. Hopefully it pans out, and I think that's the stuff that they've done really well with. Okay.
I guess the last question before we go: which version should people buy?
I think that's gonna depend on what you own,
because there's the $60 version.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Because there are different packages, and you know, Microsoft has been doing this for a while with these games that you can pay a premium to play them early.
Yeah. Well, you know, the car pass is gonna. I think it depends on what you value. You know, if you want the most number of cars available to you, they sell that season pad, the car pass thing. That'll let you, you know, get access to more vehicles. And then there's expansions that I don't know that they've said what the expansions are, but the Forza Horizon 3 DLC was really strong. That was where they did that Hot Wheels DLC that was pretty amazing and really inspired.
Strange.
So, yeah. So my hope is that they find something equally, you know, an equal departure from the norm for this one. But I don't know. And I wouldn't feel comfortable, you know, recommending the game based on stuff that isn't even out yet.
Sure.
it's the sort of thing where, I think honestly the best way to play Microsoft games at this point is Game Pass. Like it's cheaper that way. But if you're like, well, if you're super jonesing for it, then you already purchased the $100 version, and you're playing it right now instead of watching this. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
People probably know what they're getting into at this point, one way or the other. They put out a demo, so people can always check it out for themselves and make those sorts of decisions. I think that I see a world where that $100 version is totally acceptable, even if I'm not really into the whole give us more money and you can play early thing. I think that's kind of a weird way to go. It feels kind of dirty when games do that. That said, if their expansions are as good as they were in Forza Horizon 3, and they do the car stuff really well, they add more cars and the VIP bonus, that gets you kind of even more cars and little odds and ends and bonuses along the way. I feel like they end up probably justifying that money. That's assuming that the DLC is good, though, which I don't know that I can do. Yeah. I'd like to think it would be great based on past performance, but we'll see. So at that point, I would say, hey, the standard edition is fine. You can always upgrade it from there based on what you want to do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you have it.
There it is.
The final word on Forza Horizon 4.
Yeah.
Seek no other reviews.
This is
you just heard one.
You just had it.
Yep.
You got it.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.